All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being able to join us. My name is Brandon Hummins with Hummins Consulting. I am joined here by Lee Kramer. I'll give him introduction here in a second. I'll give him a moment to introduce himself. But I want to welcome you to this workshop. So the entire series of workshops this year that Hummins Consulting is doing, we're partnering with many other experts that we see throughout the industry to bring you premium educational content. The reason that we're doing this is twofold. One, I am a strong believer in self-development. I think that whenever you can put time aside to develop your education, develop your mind, the better off you're going to be. And I'm deeply passionate about the world of business and specifically procurement. If we can do buying better, I think that we can make the world a better place, right? So there's a sales side of just pushing products out to people, but then there's the educational buying side, and that is what is strategic sourcing and procurement. When it comes into that, a lot of people look at that as a department within a company just to save money. I look at it as sustainability, responsibility, and ethical purchasing. And all of that culminates together in my mind to say there are a lot of different elements that attach themselves when it comes to strategic sourcing and procurement. And one of the main pieces, in my opinion, is the psychology around it. So I am no sort of expert in human behavior. I think that I've studied it a lot. And part of that is the reason why I bring in the element of human behavior into the world of business. So I partnered with Lee Kramer. He is a success and life coach with a lot of experience around understanding people, understanding their motivators, their saboteurs, their goals, and their values. And so what we did is we came together and we put together a brief workshop. So we'll be done with this at the end of the hour. The beginning of what we'll do, and I'll go into the agenda here in a second, but it's really just going to be us setting the scene. And then the last entire half is going to be us actually working with you guys on working through some scenarios. Eventually, what this might turn into is an official class that is purchased by other educational institutions. So we're kind of in a study workshop groundbreaking zone of combining different elements of psychology, human behavior, and procurement, and then creating something new together. So that's what I'm super excited about. I've had over a decade or so in strategic sourcing. That's where a lot of my experience is coming from. But I'm also an official instructor with ISM. I've worked with SIG, as well as Procurement Foundry and ProcureCon. So those are my four primary groups that I work with overall. And I partner, like I said before, with other experts like Lee Kramer. So I'm going to pause there. Lee Kramer, do you want to introduce yourself for a moment?
Sure. Thank you so much, Brandon, and great to see everyone here today. As Brandon mentioned, I am a success life and career coach. I have had over 20 years of helping people achieve their goals, trying to help them find their purpose and passion in life. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I hope this is a very useful and helpful webinar today.
Thank you so much for that, Lee. So here's the quick agenda that we have so far. We are going to first start with defining, identifying, and then profiling stakeholders. So we're going to understand, we're going to get on the same page about what stakeholders are. And then through that, I know that some of you may not be actively working on a project, but I want you to kind of pull from some of your previous experiences and work in some of that knowledge to the exercises that we're going to be doing, because I'm going to be giving you a small task throughout this. And when you think about that, I want you to start building on a lot of your other experiences, right? The next piece is going to go through analyzing some of your values and goals, and then understanding some of your motivators and saboteurs. So the reason that we call this class Reflect and Relate is because first you're going to try to understand parts of yourself, and then you're going to be able to understand others that you work with, that you deal with, your clients, your prospects, your whoever that's important to you. And then lastly, we're going to finish off with some scenarios. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this first piece here. The first piece is going to be around marketing, or I'm sorry, mastering stakeholder identification. So the reason that we're doing this right now, and I want to kind of bring it back to an overall purpose of this, right? If you can learn some of the soft skills when it comes to working with people, analyzing people, no matter what your role is, you're going to be more successful. Before I jump into the actual content, everyone's heard of the golden rule, right? People know what the golden rule is? The golden rule is around you treat people the way that you treat people how you would want to be treated, right? So you wouldn't do something to somebody else that you wouldn't want done to yourself. And then there's what's called the platinum rule. The platinum rule is you treat people how they want to be treated. So let's say, for example, you're okay with being talked to a certain way. If somebody else isn't, and you've identified that, you should treat them how they then want to be treated, right? So when we think about how that relates to business, one of the things that can give you a leg up in the scenario is first identifying who these different people in your life are, and then starting to treat them appropriately based on their own preferences. So let's kind of dive into this, right? So what you see on the screen here is all around, like I said before, mastering that stakeholder identification. And what you're going to be thinking about in this situation is when you think about a stakeholder, this is anyone who is impacted by a decision or a change that is being made. Whether you're making that change or you're having some sort of effect on that change, that is essentially what a stakeholder is. When we kind of break this down even more, it can take multiple forms. So often when people think about stakeholders, like I'm in the world of procurement, my entire job is around strategic sourcing and helping companies purchase things the right way. A lot of the time, if I'm in IT, my stakeholders are going to be people like the CIO or the head of IT or the head of procurement, kind of these different leaders throughout the organization that I'm supporting and advising. But at the same time, my stakeholders are also the end users of things that are changing. So here's a quick example. I put in place a compensation program, right? I partnered with a supplier out there. They were HR experts at putting in place these compensation programs. And my stakeholders weren't just the leaders over in HR and hiring managers and directors, but they were all of the people that were affected by this compensation program. In addition, the stakeholder, or rather the supplier, is also my stakeholder, right? So when we think about stakeholders, I don't want you to put it into this small box. Literally everyone's a stakeholder. Another personal thing about myself, I'm married. My wife and I met in high school, actually. We've been married for almost 6 years now, and we have 2 kids together. And when I think about my personal life, my wife is my stakeholder, right? She's somebody that I have to care about if my decisions are made, if they, how they impact her. So anybody in your life where your decisions impact them, they are going to be your stakeholder. So the first thing that I want you to do, right, if you have a piece of paper or if you can open up a Word dialog box somewhere next to you, is think of a project or think of a situation, anything that you're currently involved in, right? And I want you to start jotting down who would be some influential stakeholders in that situation. So any situation at all, it can be a personal one, it could be one from work. If I'm thinking about one right now, I'm in the process of switching and transitioning jobs, right? So currently, another personal thing about me working at Tropicana right now, this is actually my last day, and then I'm moving on to Walgreens. When I think about influential stakeholders in that, I think about people in my personal life. I think about my new boss in this situation who's going to kind of be one of my stakeholders responsible for the impacts of my decisions. So just think about whatever situation you're going through, whether it's work related or not, you're going to have certain stakeholders. And then let's go on to this next one here. Let's dive in a little bit more because the next section is going to be about putting people and ideas into certain boxes. Now, I know that it doesn't sound right when I say it like that, right? No one likes to be put in a box. But from an analytical standpoint, the better and more efficiently that we can do this, the more successful we can be overall. What I mean by that, and sorry that it's cutting off a little bit there at the top, but it's all around categorizing our stakeholders. There's going to be 4 quadrants that we can put our stakeholders into. The quicker and what this should become for you guys over time, right? And kudos to you if this is already all automatic for you. But you should be able to quickly identify a stakeholder and then in your mind mentally just put them into a box. And then based on the box that you put them in, you should be able to make quick and educated decisions on how you engage with those stakeholders. So let's give a quick few examples here on that matrix that we see on the form. Top left are the ones that you keep satisfied. Those are going to be the ones with high power but low interest in your pocket, in your project. So let's say, for example, And this situation, keep satisfied, might be an executive level senior leadership team member, right? They've got a lot of power, but because they have so many different things going on, they may overall have low interest. And then the other side is going to be top right, is going to be managed closely. Those are going to be your high power, high interest, somebody that has a lot of influence, somebody that could change and alter the way that your decisions are impacting others. And then they also have a high amount of interest, so they're heavily involved in this. Maybe they have their own motivations for being heavily involved, but those are going to be the ones that you're giving consistent updates to. They're going to be detailed updates. You're going to be giving them as much information that you see is available to yourself. And then bottom right is going to be the section that you keep informed. Those are going to be the low power but high interest. Those are going to be potentially the ones that your end users are, the ones that are directly influenced or impacted. So like, let's say, for example, the compensation package program that I put together before. Those are going to be some of the people that are actually receiving those compensation packages. They're going to be extremely interested, right? Because that's going to be their money that we're dealing with, but they may not have a lot of influence to alter or change that decision. And then bottom left are going to be the ones that you monitor. Those are going to be just keeping in tabs with their low power, low interest. And so the quicker that we can put people kind of into these various categories, we then know how to engage with them and then how to treat them. So you did on the previous slide, hopefully you wrote down a few potential stakeholders that you're dealing with. Now I want you to kind of put your brain to it and put them into one of these buckets that we see here, right? You should be able to kind of understand, where are they going to fall? Are they going to be in the keep satisfied, manage closely, monitor, or keep informed buckets? And then I want to get us down to, how do we actually then profile these stakeholders? So I provided what I would like to envision as a blueprint for some of this engagement. And once again, this is also going to end in a quick exercise of you guys kind of looking at some of the stakeholders that you're working with. And then at the end of this one, you're going to try to figure out how can they influence your overall approach by drafting somewhat of this brief profile on them. So when we look at this, we have to determine what key attributes are going to be there, right? The communication preference, the needs and expectations, and the potential for cooperation or conflict. Ultimately, what we're trying to do at this next stage, after putting them into these buckets, is to understand more detailed elements about who they are as people, right? So what that means for us is, let's say, for example, once again, I'm working with a stakeholder. Let's say they're my boss, right? Let's say they're one of the most important people there. I need to figure out if they prefer for me to give them a phone call when something changes or happens. I need to figure out if they prefer emails. How do they first like to be communicated? And then I need to figure out, what are their needs and overall expectations when it comes to the way that I deliver my results, right? Are they expecting it in a certain format? Are they expecting, what quality level are they expecting each time? What sort of information, what types of information do they expect me to include when I'm sending this message? So once I figure out all these different attributes, then I can start to create an overall profile. So now that you've got your stakeholders in these different buckets, everyone, I want you to just to think of a few attributes out of these three categories that I provided, and just start jotting down a few of those next to some of your stakeholders. So these, once again, it could be, hey, I know that every time they prefer in-person meetings, right? Or I know that this particular stakeholder wants me to include the facts and dashboard information every time I send them a document. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm just going to ask some people. Dan, Jenny, Clark, what are your thoughts so far? Do you want to share any of the stakeholders that you've written down so far, or the projects that they may relate to?
Well, Brandon, this is an interesting conversation so far. For me, it's a little bit different because I'm not really working in a big organization with lots of people right now. My role as a coach is a little bit different, does involve stakeholders. I think the key thing that you said to me, though, related especially to this slide that you have up here, is asking, because you really can't decide what their communication preferences are, or their needs and expectations, or those things, unless you actually ask them for feedback and suggestions, which is a critical step there. So if I related it to a client, for instance, I recently finished working with a client, and one of the things that this particular client was, like everybody else, is super busy all the time, right? They have little time for any wasted time for sure. And his preference was that hey, don't send me too many emails. You know,
Right.
if you need to send me a message, just send me a text message. You get so many emails, you don't have time to read them anyway. You know? Okay, well, I can do that. You know, so unless you ask, though, you don't learn those things. So I think that's just a critical thing to bring up there
Yeah.
with any stakeholder.
And Dan, you're right in a couple different ways there. One, I don't think that you need to be in a huge organization to have stakeholders. I think you're right. Your clients in this situation are your stakeholders, right? They're people that have a vested interest in your performance, what you're doing, the decisions that you make. And so I think that you're exactly right. And one of the main points is, yes, you do need to have those conversations. It's often that we assume that we know what people expect because we might say, well, I knew somebody in this position before, and here's what they wanted, and here's what we tried to do. So you're exactly right. Having that conversation is extremely important. Clark, what are your thoughts on this? Were you able to kind of pinpoint any stakeholders that you currently have, and what's their profile like?
Absolutely. And can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. So in my role I'm director of supplier management governance here at CNA Insurance. So twofold. My stakeholders, one are our three largest business units, which is claims, technology, and operations. And because I'm over governance, I'm setting the stage on how we do a lot of outsourcing. Organizations do a lot of outsourcing. And so from a governance perspective, I have to make sure that our business units understand the risk associated with outsourcing and making sure that they have the right protocols in place, guardrails in place to reduce any risk associated with outsourcing, right? So I do that by providing industry standard best practices or training and things of that nature. Then I have my manager, to the point you made, who's my stakeholder, who is very visual, right? So anytime I'm working on anything, she's very visual, so she wants to see things in a PowerPoint deck, right? Or if I'm leading a project, she wants to see project plans or whatever. So she's very visual, whatever. So I say to say that this information today is very timely because one of the challenges with me is how much communication is too much communication, right? Through my journey of my career, a lot of times you hear individuals say, sometimes you need to over communicate with individuals, but to your point, that over communication has to fit their profile of their need, of how they need and want to receive that information, right? And so my goal with my three large business units, claims, technology, and operations, is to kind of keep them engaged, keep them abreast on things that I'm working on, keep them abreast on things that may be coming out of my area or whatever, right? And so what's the best the vehicle for that? What is the best communication vehicle for that, right? You have email, you got meeting cadence, which I think can be overbearing sometimes, because when I see meetings, for me personally, when I see meetings pop up my calendar, the first thing that comes to my mind is, wow, another meeting, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so meeting cadence sometimes can be a bit too much because you find yourself in more meetings than actually doing work, right?
Exactly.
So you got to be
And
careful
especially if
about
they're
the
super
meeting.
close together, right? It's like, hey, we just had a meeting last week. I'm still taking the notes from that previous meeting. Exactly.
So sometimes meetings could be a bit overbearing, right? Then we have the big push with Teams, right? We use Microsoft Teams, and the big push in my space is we have Teams channels, right? And so there's a way to communicate with your stakeholders through Teams channel. Well, to be honest with you, I'm part of a lot of Teams channel, and when it pops up, I keep working. I don't pause, switch over to another screen, and read who's reaching out to me on Teams channel, right? So I'm not sure that's the most effective way to engage and keep engaged with stakeholders. So I am it's been a challenge for me. So I'm so glad that this is so timely, because I really want to understand what is the best avenue and way and the vehicle that you need to use to stay engaged with stakeholders, where it's not overbearing and that your way of communicating it to them is not being ignored, right?
Exactly.
I'll look at emails first before I do anything through Teams channel. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
And it does make sense, but you make a really good point, which is everyone's a little different, right? So you have your preferences. You say, hey, here's what makes sense for me. I have a lot of suppliers, and kind of like other people mentioned before, like Dan, you even talked a little bit about this, but I even get text messages from a lot of my suppliers and stakeholders, right? And that's their preferred way of communicating. And then once they realize that I'm okay with it, it's all kind of open doors for them. But I think what's going to be interesting here, Clark, is some of our next sections actually, because not only does it kind of talk a little bit about these different communication styles, but there's, to me, like, let's say, for example, and I don't want to steal any of Lee's thunder here, but let's say, for example, if you know that Clark, as yourself, that you may get anxious at times, right? Maybe you know that you get anxious whenever you see meetings. That could be a saboteur emotional element of yourself, right? That could be something that kind of that you put in the way of your own success. But just like you may have some of those things, other people may too. So let's say this, for example. Let's say you recognize that somebody else hates meetings on their calendar, but that's the only way that you see the ability to get things done. So you're constantly throwing those meetings on, not knowing that that's actually pulling back the progress that they're able to make because they're not looking at that as helpful, right? So all of a sudden, by that identification and trying to understand that, you're able to kind of shift away from that behavior, correct it, and then start treating them differently as well. So just something to think about there. So I think that's fantastic though. I'm sorry, Clark, you wanted to add?
Oh, no, you good. Good. I was just saying thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. And I love this. This is kind of why we want these things. This is why we like to keep them small as well, so that we can have these conversations. And then Jenny, eventually, I do definitely want to hear a little bit from you as well.
I was gonna agree as far as like knowing your audience. So I support marketing at Ace Hardware, and there's certain stakeholders that I work with that just want the updates, and then there's ones that want the full picture, and it's knowing what each person wants and what they find is useful, and making sure that you're doing that accordingly, so you're not wasting their time, or like you said, not what you said, but like bothering them with details that they don't really want to have or need to have at the time.
Exactly. Totally agree with you there, Jenny. All right. So this next portion is all going to be about kind of Lee's section here. So he's going to kind of walk us through a little bit more around the values and goals. So this is a continuation on. So keep some of these same stakeholders in mind that we've been thinking about and working with before, and just continue on kind of framing the perspective around them and building out that profile. But Lee, I'll pass it on over to you now.
Great. Thanks so much, Brandon. Understanding your own values and your stakeholders' values is really critical for establishing positive relationships. It's also important to know your company's values and the values of your stakeholders' companies. So how do you find that out? Well, for one, you can look on their website to see what the company's values are. Hopefully they're listed. But with your stakeholders, the way you can do this is through genuine conversations, getting an understanding of the people who you're doing business with, finding out what's important to them, discussing past scenarios at their current place of employment and also previous employment can give you important insight into their values. Discussing your stakeholders and their company's short and long-term goals are also critical in establishing insight and understanding how best to meet their needs now so that their objectives can be met, and then establishing a foundation for a long-term partnership with them. So sharing your goals and objectives and working with them is really important. How are you going to help them achieve their goals? Having collective goal setting can really set the stage for a trusting and loyal relationship with your stakeholders. So I'm going to give you an example. Our protagonist, we'll call him Ben. Ben is a procurement specialist, and he's meeting with a new client for the first time. We'll call her Terry. Before diving into business, Ben will want to establish a rapport and a foundation for trust with Terry. Ben can do this by telling his story, what he does, why he does it, what he brings to the company, who his stakeholders are, his motivations, his goals. Ben can then ask Terry questions to gather similar information so that together they can both have a vision for how they're going to work together, and also how Ben can meet Terry's business needs and those of the companies. If we can move on to the next slide. So understanding the motives and the drivers of your stakeholders is vital as well. What motivates them to accomplish their goals? And then how can you harness this information so that you can meet your own goals while helping them achieve theirs? So it's like the Jerry Maguire example, help me help you. Knowing your own saboteurs is extremely helpful in many ways, as Brandon pointed out. But let me pause for a second to explain what saboteurs are a little bit more. These are the beliefs, behaviors that can get in the way of you accomplishing your goals or aspirations. So some of the saboteurs can include people pleasing, hyperachiever, stickler, restless, avoider, hyper-rational, or hyper-vigilant. There's a really great assessment tool online through the Positive Intelligence Center. And you can take a saboteur test, takes maybe 5 minutes or so. You'll get your results via email. So it's always good, I think, to be cognizant of your own saboteurs. Many of you may know already what your saboteurs are. For some, it will be a surprise. When I took the exam, I would say probably 50-50 for me, like 50% I knew or had a feeling, and then 50% were like, oh, like a little aha moment for me, you know, a little insight. So there are ways to test for these saboteurs, right? In addition to that assessment. And there's a way for you to, without really knowing for sure, your stakeholder saboteurs, there's a way of guessing or maybe projecting what their saboteurs might be. So I'll give you an example. Let's imagine another procurement specialist. We'll call her Lisa. Lisa, her saboteur is a hyperachiever. She always has her company goals top of mind. She has to meet her requirements each quarter. Lisa, as a hyperachiever, will then go above and beyond to achieve her objectives. Lisa is working with her customer, let's call him Jim, whose top saboteur is restless, meaning Jim, he likes to push the envelope. He likes to try new things. He's not satisfied with the status quo. Lisa, she just wants to finalize the sale. But Jim, he keeps bringing up new ideas for Lisa, changing his mind, driving Lisa bonkers. So obviously we have a conflict here, or a potential conflict. Lisa, let's assume, is quite astute about her own saboteurs, and she also has an innate ability, let's say, to guess other saboteurs or the other people's saboteurs. She picks up on the fact that Jim's saboteur is restless. So then how can she overcome her saboteur and also work with Jim's? So one way is for Lisa to put together a package that combines both standard items that the company has been buying, but also add in a few new ones that may be new to the company and that they will agree to test out that will appease Jim's goals. So then a compromise is then established. And I think compromise is the key here, right? I'm going to add another word, and that's compassion. Knowing people's saboteurs can really help you get a better understanding of who they are, where they're coming from, what's driving them, and what's getting in the way of them achieving their respective goals. And for both parties to reach an agreement, right? So you're walking in their shoes. Let's go to the next slide. So fostering a growth mindset.
And then also, Lee, real quick,
Yeah, sure.
because some of the things that you were saying really resonated with me. And when I think about myself, and I kind of want everybody else to think about themselves as well in this situation, right? So, Lee, you gave some really good examples around what these behaviors can look like and how we can kind of find these behaviors in others. And when I think about this, and when you were listing off these different saboteur behaviors, I remember when I was in high school, what I really struggled with was trying to be an overachiever and a people pleaser, right? I would say I did relatively well in high school. I actually graduated top of my class, but I think that with that came a lot of potentially negative behaviors as well, right? I think when it translated over into my professional career, I was constantly looking at it and saying to myself, well, I'll take on as much as I need to take on because I want everybody to be happy with my performance. So I was doing stuff like overextending myself to my other colleagues, my bosses, supervisors, whoever needed me. And I think that at the end of the day, sometimes the project would then suffer, right? So from your experience, how can we sometimes look at how do we identify these quickly and early, right? And should we always look at some of these saboteurs as negative? Like, how do we figure out what they are, and are they always bad?
Sure. So I think taking a step back is always important to kind of gather, what's going on in that moment for you. Why are you saying yes to everything that your boss is asking you to do? And in most cases, it's to the detriment of your own work-life balance, your own mental health, physical health, et cetera. And that's not fair to you. It's not fair to the company, because then you're not able to perform to the best of your ability. So one example, Brandon, is, for a hyperachiever and a people pleaser, that's can sometimes be a very interesting dynamic, right? Because you want to go above and beyond all the time. You want to please your boss all the time. And so it's almost like a chemical reaction, right?
Hmm.
So one approach is to talk to your boss and be honest with them, to say, I have a lot on my plate right now. Can something be taken off my plate and be given to someone else? Or if that's not an option, or you don't feel comfortable saying that to your boss, then to say, can you help me prioritize? I have a lot of projects right now. Help me prioritize so I can be or I can do the best job. And, for you, for the company, and for myself. So that's one approach. To answer your question about not all saboteur behavior is bad, that's totally correct. So let's take people pleasing. A people pleaser, on the positive side, on the flip side, is someone that is compassionate, someone who is kind and caring, cares about others, right? So you're going to have people's welfare always top of mind. So that is the positive approach. A hyperachiever, the positive spin on that is that they're going to go above and beyond and do, a fantastic job in whatever they're doing.
Mhm.
So as long as it's not getting in the way of you accomplishing your goals, and meeting the company's objectives, then it can be seen in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
But it's how these become obstacles, or how they can be detrimental to your performance, or to both your professional and personal life. That's where we need to have some introspection, have some idea as to what is happening in that moment, and taking a step back is always a good approach. Like,
Right.
why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling this way?
Interesting. I want to kind of ask participants in the room here. Do you guys feel like you know what your potential saboteurs are? Do you think that you maybe have an idea of around, hey, here's something that maybe has a two sides of the same coin type of benefit and risk to me? What comes to mind when you guys think about yourselves in that way?
Well, Brandon, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Dan, go ahead. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I just say in my working career, probably for me it was I have to work hard. And I'm kind of an old school guy, and my deal was I never missed work, and always wanted to have my I never wanted to get surprised by my boss, like I didn't know the details and stuff. Um, Honestly, it worked for me in my career. Looking back on it now, I probably worked a lot harder than I needed to. So it had some good sides to it. On the personal side, I probably gave up more of my life than I needed to my career, and at the detriment of things in my personal life. That's just me. So
Yeah. Interesting. So let me ask you a quick question about that, Dan, and then we'll move on to Clark and Jenny, if you have also something that you wanted to share as well. But Dan, my question to you would be, if you were your manager 10 years ago even, would you have given yourself a different piece of advice around how you manage your work-life balance? Like, what would you have told yourself from a manager position if you could?
Now that's a great question. I'm not really sure. I say looking back on it now that I'm removed from that, 55-hour week work life for a few years now. I can just look back on it and say the effort and commitment that I had to my career, my employer, um, probably I could have been just as successful given less effort. So that's just a reflection that I have looking in a mirror, At the same time, somewhat is who I am. It's just the way that I was wired, and I think it was Arnold Palmer who one time said, the harder I worked, the more successful I got. And that tended to be the case for me. So it wasn't that it didn't work. It's just my own reflection now looking in a mirror, as you age in life, you just start looking at things differently, and I just think looking back now, even though it worked for me, I had a successful career. Um, could have gave less and been in the same spot. That's just a learning, I guess.
Right. No, that makes sense. And then I guess let's say, for example, if you were managing somebody right now and you saw that they're working 50 to 60 hours a week, what would you tell them at that point if you were their manager? And part of me is asking that question because I'm putting it into the corporate world and landscape, that professional environment. Like, how do you have those conversations to coach people on a better balance while also ensuring that you want them to kind of give you the best that they can give you in terms of their productivity?
Well, that's another great question, Brandon. I don't know that I would tag it to working a certain number of hours or not necessarily. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing too much work by how many hours you work. There's situations as anybody that's held a leadership role. There's times when you're going through whether it's mergers, acquisitions, major change initiatives. You got to do whatever it takes because a lot of times the team around you, even though you didn't always make that decision, right? Everybody has a boss. So, I can think of some things that happened in my career, and I don't want to take the time up on this call for that. But basically, where I even questioned the marching orders and said, well, you know what? I don't think we should do that right now. Can we push this off till X and do it then? Whoever in this case, my boss said, no, that's not an option. We have to go now. And that as just based on your experience, that's going to cause a lot of turbulence and a lot of white water, right? Employees, they have no idea. They look at it as, wait a minute, you're the one that's instituting this. You're the one that's causing all this white water. They look for you now. It's your job as a leader to smooth that water out as quick as possible. And the quicker you can smooth it out, the better it is for them. But sometimes that requires, it might take this, if it's a big change initiative, it might be a year-long process. And so it requires a lot of dedication and hard work. So I don't know that I would phrase it that way. I just say that what I would caution people now, looking back on it now, is I remember when I left the business after 34 years, and I remember CEO telling me, hey, how it would always put the company first, always put the employees first, and how I was going to be greatly missed. Well, this organization had about 3,500 people, and I said to him, I said, well, CEO's name was Chris. I said, well, thank you for your kind words. I said, but the reality is you put your fist in a bucket of water and you pull it out and the hole fills up immediately. You think that what you do and how valuable you really are, in a big organization, you really aren't. You're just one spoke in the wheel. And if you don't believe that, then, and so I would just tell someone that I thought was working too hard, and really just to always put most important things first in your life, which has got to be, your family and your health have got to come before, and in some cases, whatever spiritual beliefs you have, those things need to come before your career, and manage it that way. Whether you work, if you're constantly working, to rephrase your question, you're constantly working 55 hours a week, and and there's no whitewater going on, there's no major change initiatives, there's no reason that you're doing that, then that's the point I think where you need to have as a leader, have a conversation with that person and just remind them. And that comes back to somebody mentioned compassion and empathy before, especially if they have a family and kids at home. Remind them what's important in life and help them figure out how they can work less if possible.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you so much for that, Dan. That was, to me, extremely insightful, very much so on point with what we were learning and going through. And then Clark, how about you go real quick, and then I got to pass it back over to Lee to make sure we have enough time for the scenarios at the end.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm gonna keep it real quick. So, and when you're talking about these saboteurs, I could resonate a lot with the one where you were talking about people pleaser and just always saying yes or whatever. And so when I think about my career journey, I predicate my success today based on the relationships that I built throughout my career, and especially in the current organizations that I work in. However, when you're really, really good at relationship building, you find yourself in a situation where you're saying yes, yes, and not that balance of being able to push back and say no, right? So it's a pros and a cons to that or whatever, right? And so I was writing down some notes or whatever, and I said a lot of times we work in organizations where you don't have time to celebrate your successes, right? You do well on something, and then right when you completed that huge initiative, whatever, you got about a half a day to celebrate that great thing you did, and then the next day is on to the next one, whatever. But I think is totally not good or whatever. So I kind of shy away from, if I read postings of jobs or whatever that say fast-paced environment. I'm so done with that fast-paced environment stuff. Is ridiculous because you're not going to get. It's all about, you're looking at quantity of work and not quality of work, right? And what I've noticed how I am, I'm a great producer. I'm a doer, and I believe in performance. I like to get my marching orders, then I kind of like to back off of me and leave me alone. You know what I'm saying? Because I call myself going into my lab, getting into my zone, getting it done. I don't need a whole lot of check-in and check-ups. I'll let you know where I'm at, and I'll give you, updates on how you need it, whatever. But do I need weekly check-ins? Nah, I don't need all that or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes you find yourself in a position where it's hard to communicate that to your leaders, your managers, or whatever. So I'm kind of working on how to do that better, so I can get the best. It's all about performance, right? And so you want to be able to make sure that what's the best outcome for me is being the best performer, and I have to try to balance and keep that, how I communicate that with my leaders. So
yeah. And what I imagine, so thank you so much for that, Clark. And I'll be real quick with my feedback there. What I imagine sometimes could happen with you is, because you're so independent, you may have leaders that are also accountable for your outcomes. And so probably what they feel sometimes is like, hey, I need to know if something goes right, wrong, or left, just in case, because my bosses are going to be asking me about what you're doing, and I need to then respond. And you're like, hey, I'll get it done. Let me do it. And you'll check back in with me when it's time to do that. So I can understand why that could be a potential area of conflict there. But
and a 2-second real reply to that. I'm in a situation I'm in now. They brought me in to build a function out. I'm building out the supply management function, enterprise-wide function out for my company that they never had before. So I'm in year 2 of the build. So yeah, they do have to get updates on how that build out is going. But let me just let you know this: I'm a one-man shop, and I got a lot on my plate. I don't have a team. And so I'm building out an enterprise-wide function, and it's just me. So you can imagine the pressure that I have and the workload that I have, because it's just one person. So I'll leave it there.
I can't imagine. We should connect sometime later. I literally just finished doing that for Tropicana. Exactly that, building it out. It was a one-man team for a while. But all right, Lee, I'm going to pass it back over to you, and then hopefully we can get through that, and then we can spend the last couple minutes on the scenarios that we put together.
Perfect. One thing that I want to add as well, and to Dan's point, or tying it in, is we're seeing a generational shift with how folks are working. The millennials, the Gen Zers, they are really prioritizing their work-life balance. They're really prioritizing this concept of working smarter, not longer. And there's also momentum around this 4-day work week. We'll see where this goes, but there's a bill proposed in Congress about it. So we'll see how this goes. I think we can probably do a whole other webinar on generations and how to manage millennials, how to manage Gen Z, because they are very different on how they manage and how they like to be managed. And how to work with them. So back to growth mindset. A growth mindset, unlike a fixed mindset, is having the ability to be open to new ideas, new approaches, new way of interacting with others. It also helps you to grow professionally and personally. So, for example, like a fixed mindset, when you're giving someone constructive feedback, they may listen, but they're not going to change. You know, they may be sitting there with arms crossed or, you know, cursing under their breath, right? That you're giving them feedback, and they're going to think, you know, I am perfect the way I am. I've had, you know, good results and I'm not changing. A growth mindset is someone that is open to change and open to feedback, and willing to take that feedback and use it for their own development. So being open, adaptable, nimble are really keys to successful business relationships as well. So how are some new approaches to doing business, or what are they? What are you willing to try? What are you open to? What are you open to compromise? What are your negotiables and what are your non-negotiables? I think it's really important for you to, you know, to understand where you land. And then again, to be open to feedback and conversation. Having both parties adapt a growth mindset is, you know, the ideal situation because it allows both parties to succeed, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. In the case before, Lisa illustrated a growth mindset. She was willing to be open to Jim's ideas, despite the fact that it may have caused her, you know, some discomfort at first. She was open to new ideas, and as a result, she, as a representative of the company, they were able to lay a new foundation of trust and customer loyalty.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, growth mindset is the key here, but, you know, it takes practice.
And one of the other things I would add to having a growth mindset, when you think about your stakeholders, right? Some of the examples that Lee gave, often it's going to be important for you to quickly identify if the person that you're dealing with has that mindset. And that will change the way that you address, engage with them, and then talk to them. And it affects what their motivations and saboteurs could be, right? So I think kind of some of the things that Lee is saying, if they're open to these new ideas, they're open to this change, that's somebody that you don't have to have a ton of conflict against in order to push forward a new idea or concept. But now, somebody on the very opposite end of the spectrum who says, we're doing this thing the way that it's always been done because it's always been done this way, that's going to be somebody that you have to talk to differently, that you have to get other champions on your team to address. And ultimately, that might just turn to be some obstacles in the process. So Lee and I are going to take this first scenario together. We're going to just talk through it a little bit, but then we actually have two other scenarios. And because of time, we may not get to one of them. But for the second scenario, Lee and I won't do any talking, and we just want you guys, as far as the audience, to handle that one. So I'll read through this, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. A manufacturing company plans to introduce a new software system aimed at enhancing operational efficiency. The IT department, crucial for its implementation, has reservations about the system's capability with existing legacy systems and the steep learning curve for staff, stemming from past difficulties with software integration. Now, the task here is going to be to formulate a strategy to address IT department's concerns and the new software system's integration. So when I read this, this is a very real situation that happens all the time. Now, whether you deal with IT or deal with something, what you got to boil this down to some basic concepts of what's actually happening in the scenario. So what's happening is you're introducing something new to a department. You have a team of people that are responsible for carrying out the implementation of that new thing, and they're hesitant because this hasn't gone so well in the past, right? So from what I think about with this, you know, you can break that whole thing down into a lot of different scenarios. We can even take one of Clark's scenarios where he's going to be putting in an entirely new supplier management framework. That doesn't have too much to do with IT, but he's going to have to work with another group to actually implement that. And so we'll kind of take a look at this from two different perspectives. I'll provide my procurement perspective on this, and I want to pass on over to Lee to provide a little bit more of a human and psychological perspective on it all. So from procurement, I might say, let's do a pilot or a test case with the IT team. I might say, if you guys are hesitant about how this can go, let's do this at a small scale, kind of a practice zone, put this in a sandbox environment so that we can see if this will work properly. And I can connect us with references of other customers with a similar environment to ours that have worked with this company to kind of give you guys a little bit more satisfaction there. So you see, I kind of talked through that. We have these 4 scenarios kind of below that, but these are all guiding elements, right, from what you see on the screen here. That's just kind of giving you some ideas overall. And thanks for joining, John. I know that you got to jump off, but thanks so much for popping in here for a second. So that's kind of what I'll say about scenario 1 there. But Lee, what are your thoughts on how you would handle scenario 1 without that kind of procurement mindset and background? What's your perspective?
Sure. So this is a perfect example of having a growth mindset, having your team being open to a new approach, even though they may have had some challenges in the past with a similar experience. So what can the company do? The company can listen to IT's concerns and address them. So IT feels heard. They feel that they're part of the process and part of the buy-in, the rollout, even the training. And so what the company should be leading with is going back to the C word, compassion. We hear you. We hear your concerns. We want this to be a better experience for everyone. And our main goal is to make sure that that happens. So having shared goals and communicating that to the IT team, but to the entire company. So it's the how, it's the why, and it's the when.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to go on to the next one here, and then we're going to spend the last couple minutes because I also want to make sure I'm getting everybody out on time. And then I can send some of these scenarios to you guys after if you would like them, just to kind of review and get some practice in. And then also, if you ever are interested in certification, these are going to be the types of questions that go into those exams. I'm on actually one of the boards that builds these out, so you guys are getting a little bit of exam practice here. So I'll read this one real quickly, and then I'll pass it on to Dan, Clark, and Jenny to kind of just for you guys to talk through it. But this one reads, a project aimed at expanding a company's digital marketing to a younger audience faces a budgetary hurdle with unexpected costs for essential tools. The finance department, maintaining a strict budget policy, is reluctant to approve the additional expenditure following a recent budgetary critique. So remember, there's multiple forces kind of pulling here from multiple places. The task is to develop a persuasive strategy to secure approval from the finance department for the unforeseen increase in budget. How would you guys handle this? Let's talk through it.
Interesting. I think the first thing that sticks out to me is the budget concerns, right? The strict budget concerns or whatever. And so I think first is I think the angle I'll take is what can we accomplish with the set budget parameters that's been put in place currently, right? And then kind of really make the connection on the from a need perspective, is it a need where that is going to give us the return on investment, whatever. Where's it going to hit from a bottom line perspective or improvement perspective that this is a need versus a nice to have. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Kind of getting to that ROI perspective too. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say something similar to what you were saying. Reassess the whole project, and maybe you don't do the full launch right away, but do what you can, but with the budget that you have, see how it goes, and then prove the point that you need the additional funds to move forward with the whole project.
Exactly. So yeah, no, that's a good point there. Dan, do you want to add anything to that in terms of what Jenny or Clark said, or what are your thoughts? Oh, you might be on mute.
Sorry, with the finance department, I would first want hopefully try to understand why they're the pinch point. I get it, they're the finance department, they're sort of the accounting, the bean counters, the CFO or whatever. But I would find out who sponsored this. It probably wasn't the finance department.
Right.
Likely somebody above them that wanted this project put in place. Then I would also want to understand the overall finances of the company, because if it's a healthy, profitable company, and this, let's say the CEO or somebody above the finance department wants this project done and sees the potential ROI, if the company is financially stable or financially successful, then a decision needs to be made. Do we want to go forward with this, even though there's incurred costs that we didn't understand at the beginning? Is it worth it? Okay.
Mhm.
And then if the company's in a financial stress, that's going to be a different conversation then, because they're not going to have the resources to spend the extra money, most likely. But I'd want to find out, it's not the finance department. Let's try to get around that. That's just an obstacle, really. If it's
Right.
really that important, the company's going to benefit from it, then someone has to, above the finance department, has to get involved and let them know that, yes, you can release the purse strings for this.
Right. I like that, because that kind of changes the perspective of it. Instead of saying, hey, we have to satisfy finance, it's no, let's satisfy the other decision makers so that we can push this forward. And then Clark, I think you were going to add?
Oh, no, I'm good. We're good. You're good.
Okay.
Nope.
Perfect. Well, guys, unfortunately, we're at time. We had one more scenario to go, but I think that the conversation was fantastic. We got some really good input from you guys. I will be sending out a survey just to kind of collect your thoughts. And if you are interested, because you were able to attend this one, I can give you a complimentary pass to whatever next workshop we're putting out. I would love for you guys to come back, share some more thoughts and ideas, and continue to help us educate the world in terms of better ways to do business, as well as putting the human part back into whatever we're trying to do. So I just want to say thank you, guys. Hopefully I'll see you at the next one. But Lee, did you want to add anything?
No, thank you so much for inviting me. So nice to meet you all, and I wish you well in your next experience, whether it's a sale or a meeting or
Yeah.
but I also want to encourage you to look into the positive intelligence site to take that self-saboteur assessment. It's really, I think, very eye-opening.
Yeah. And I will make sure to get you guys some follow-up information as well that'll come out with the survey as well. So I'll just
Appreciate
Brandon, is it
include that
possible to
link.
be added to like the distribution list for when these come up? Because I was forwarded this from someone else. Would it be nice?
Oh.
It would be nice to be able to like get those when you have them.
Sure, I can definitely make sure we do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Brandon, I put in the chat box, somebody mentioned Mindset. Here's a good
Yeah.
book. I put it in the chat box with the author's name. If anyone wants to read it, it's a
Harold
good
S.
book.
Dweck.
Good book on mindset.
Awesome.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dan. Really appreciate that.
Thanks,
All
Brandon.
right. Well,
Thanks,
thank
Lee.
you
Brandon,
all.
I'll be in touch, okay? I'll be in touch.
Wonderful. Yeah, let's make sure we connect, Clark. But everybody, have a great weekend,
Yes.
and hopefully I'll see you again shortly. Have a good one.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Brandon.
Take care.
Take
Have a
care,
great
all.
day.
Nice to meet y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.